Yeah, so the big story from last night, outside of Jose Mourinho and outside of Spurs, was Manchester United getting the job done against AC Milan. Delighted to welcome Daniel Harris to the show now to reflect on that. Good morning, Daniel.
Hi.
So a bit of street smarts, bit of composure, and a bit of quality last night when it mattered for Manchester United.
Yeah, I think so. The quality obviously made a massive difference, because I think what you see when Pogba doesn't play, United only have one creator really, which is Bruno. And if Bruno's not on, then they have a bit of a problem, particularly because Rashford clearly wasn't fit. So in the first half, you basically had Mason Greenwood trying to make things happen, and he looks ready to explode. I mean, he's ticking, you can see. It didn't quite happen for him last night, but he was really the only player you wanted the ball to go to. But then as soon as Pogba came on, then that changed. And what you see when you have a team like United, you have a few quality players, like really high-level players, and then you have some other players who aren't good enough to lift everyone else around them. But if someone else does it, then you'll see better performances from them. And when Pogba came on, then you got a much better performance out of Fred in the second half, a much better performance out of Daniel James in the second half, because they're not the players that you can rely on, but they're also not players who you can just dismiss as useless. They just require the circumstances to be favourable around them. And I think what we saw with Pogba was that, particularly without Anthony Martial, United sometimes struggle to hold the ball. And I think Pogba's obviously his main contribution was a brilliant goal, which was just so classy. It just really encapsulated what he brought. But also, what he gives you is he gives you an outball, because if you get the ball into Pogba, and we saw it a lot last night, where he can fight off players and hang on to it, get you down the pitch and give the defence a breather. And he did really well in that aspect. And United's defence, they're defending really well at the moment. I wrote at the beginning of the season that their defensive record was better than their defending at the end of last season. But now they're actually defending properly. They're concentrating. And what you're seeing is a lot of clean sheets because they're earning them.
I do want to come back to that in a moment, but just to continue on Paul Pogba, how big a factor was his injury in the fall-off title-wise in the Premier League for Manchester United?
It was huge. I mean, that's when they were top of the league when Pogba got injured. They were beating Everton and Pogba got injured. And I mean, part of it is specifically Pogba. There are certain things that very few people, if anyone, can do on a football pitch apart from Pogba, and he was playing really well. And part of it is just the structural thing. United, as I said before, they only have one playmaker, that's Bruno. They don't have a right winger, and really, they have a good player to play on the right, but not a right winger. And the combination of those factors means they've become more predictable. And it's really strange the way the season's working, in that when the team's playing well, they're getting really good value for that form, because the games come so quickly. But similarly, when there's a drop-off, things can run away from you very quickly, again, because there are loads of games. And that's what happened with United and with Pogba. United don't have an alternative to Pogba. And then even like Donny van de Beek sat about doing nothing, waiting. I mean, you feel sorry for him, but it is kind of funny also. He sat around all season waiting for a go. And then as soon as that go might come, he gets injured too. And there's a reason why the team with the biggest squad, who can rotate 5 players every game, are top of the league. There's a reason why a team with probably the third best squad, who were rotating 5 players every game, are second in the league. And then the second that they stopped being able to do that, when they got injuries in attack and injuries in midfield, they started dropping points. And similarly, there's a reason why Chelsea are doing so well now, because they can also rotate 5 players every game. They've probably got the second best squad in the league after City. And what you're also seeing with Chelsea, and I think what I hope you're going to see with Pogba, is that players who haven't played for a bit, and whether through injury or being out of favour, are quite useful. So what you're seeing with Chelsea is that they've got Rudiger, Pulisic, Ziyech, Havertz. They've hardly played this season, either because of injury or because Lampard didn't rate them. And then now they're coming back. And when other teams are tired, I mean, I watched Chelsea and Atletico the other night, and the main thing to me wasn't really even that Chelsea's quality was so superior to Atletico, although it was. It was that they were faster to the ball and they were stronger, because half their team are much fresher. And I think that's what we saw with Pogba last night. I mean, he came on and it was like he'd eaten a mushroom, like in Mario, and everyone else had just lost their mushroom. It was just, he looked bigger and more athletic and more at one with the game than everyone else. The game was kind of, he didn't dictate the pace of the game, but when he got the ball, he was just playing at a different speed and with a different physique and with a different level to everybody else, because he's had to sit down. and no one else has. And I mean, Rashford obviously was the most obvious example of that. Like, you've seen him just over the past kind of month get weaker and weaker and weaker. I mean, maybe Mario wasn't the best example. It's more like Double Dragon or something, where you see that energy bar and it's getting less and less and less, and you can still achieve a knockout. You can still score. You can still do something good to win the game. But I mean, I was almost concerned when Solskjaer was interviewed last night, and he said that's just a little thing. Hopefully, he'll be okay for the weekend. And you're thinking, that guy needs to not be okay for the weekend, and then he needs to not go away with England, and then you might get Marcus Rashford back.
There might be another one that we come back to, Daniel. On the Paul Pogba thing, it was interesting at the end of the game, himself and Solskjaer with a very warm embrace. These two could be brilliant for each other over the years to come. It feels like the way you're talking about Paul Pogba, the conversations about him being sold are now finished.
I don't know about that, because if Pogba wants to go, then I think Pogba will probably go. I think my main problem with Pogba now is because United are good. Paul Pogba's a brilliant player to have. The problem for me with Pogba is how many games he misses. He's just missed 6 weeks. He missed almost all of last season, and he seems to miss quite a significant amount every season. And there's no reason to particularly think that's going to change. Now, if Donny van de Beek becomes a viable second creator, or United buy a right winger who can do that, or Amad Diallo can do that, then you don't necessarily need to exactly rely on Paul Pogba, because you've got alternatives to do the job that he might do. But if someone came in and offered you an amount of money that enabled you to buy a replacement, I'd still think about it, not because I don't think that Paul Pogba is a brilliant player. I mean, it will be hard to go away and find someone as good as Paul Pogba. But if Paul Pogba is injured, he's absolutely useless. And he does seem to spend quite a lot of time not playing, and that is problematic. So I would definitely, if I got an offer for Paul Pogba, I'd think about it for that reason. But otherwise, I mean, what we saw last night was great. And if we see more of that, then that would be also great.
He was Solskjaer's only substitute last night, Daniel. Does Solskjaer use his bench enough?
I think you can sometimes criticise him for who he brings off and who he brings on. So he used a lot of this season. It seems to be that the way he's used his bench has been based on some level of seniority rather than what's going on the pitch. So if he wants to bring on a striker and he wants to take off a striker, it's generally Mason Greenwood who's gone and Anthony Martial who's gone off, even though Greenwood's generally been playing better than Martial. So I think you can criticise him for that. But ultimately, if you're hanging on to a 1-0 away from home in San Siro, and I know this isn't the Milan of Saki, but they're not a terrible team, and you're still if you're hanging on to a 1-0 in San Siro and you're doing so pretty comfortably, I would be loath to make any changes. And why would you? Things were going nicely. And I actually think with Ole, and not just with Ole actually, but with the managers that preceded him, they would often, when defending a 1-goal lead, start taking off strikers and bringing on defenders. And that invites pressure on a defence that it's getting better as a defence, but it's not Brown, Vidic, Ferdinand, Evra, where you feel like you could probably invite pressure and they'll handle it. So if it looks like things are going well, then I mean, what changes are you going to make there? It wasn't like he had loads of options on the bench. Dan James is someone you might bring on when you're defending a lead because you want his ability to get you down the pitch. But he's already on. He's already there. And you didn't have Anthony Martial. He might be someone you might bring on because he holds the ball up well. He can hang on to it. He can dribble. Takes time out of the game. Wasn't available. So it wasn't like there were that many options on the bench. So really, the only options you've got are to start bringing on defensive players for attacking players. And I really liked the way United got after it, and they were still trying to score goals at the end because that is ultimately the best way of stopping the opposition from scoring is keeping the ball down the other end, and that definitely is the best way of doing so with the players that United have. So, although you want players to be rested, 1-0 up in a knockout European tie away at AC Milan probably isn't the time to be doing that, even though you might want to.
So talk us through where you see this defence going then. Lindelof and Maguire, pretty good last night to say the least. 3 goals conceded by Manchester United now in the last 11 games. And you've got a goalkeeper now who is really staking a claim to keep David De Gea out of the side. Is this trending in the right direction, coming from a pretty high base, actually, if you look at those last 11 games?
Yeah, it's not as good a defence as you would like. You'll always probably feel that they've got some mistakes in them. But what is pleasing to see is the coherence of the way that they're defending. And when that doesn't happen, the way that they're throwing themselves in the way of things, which wasn't always the case. And that combination of factors is making them quite a good defence at the moment. It looks a lot like Ole wants a centre-back. Obviously, that centre-back would be to play instead of Lindelof, who was brilliant last night. And that is the thing with so a lot of the players that United have at the moment, their top level is a good level, but their bottom level or the level that they produce most frequently isn't high enough. And I mean, if I was looking at ways to strengthen, I would want the centre-back, but it's not where I'd start. I think it's where Ole's going to start. I think that if you have the opportunity to buy Alfinger Haaland, and who knows whether that, not Alfinger Haaland, other Haaland, Erling Brute Haaland.
They might get
if you have the opportunity to buy him, then obviously every other transfer plan that you have, you need to put to one side. Because even if you think that isn't the area that most needs addressing in the team, well, if you can sign a player that good, then you just have to do it because it changes everything. But other than that, it seems a lot like Ole's priority as a centre-back. I would like a centre-back who's better than Lindelof, because I don't think that ultimately Lindelof is good enough. But I think that if you got the rest of the team right, you could probably win the league with that defence. And so I would be looking at a midfield player to play as a number 6. So that would be my priority, because I also think that if you had someone who could control the tempo and who could patrol the area in front of the back four, you would concede fewer goals and the defence would be put under less pressure. But yeah, the defending is looking really good, and you can see that they've done some work on the training ground and they've thought about what to do, because the way that they're operating as a unit is better, but the way that they're taking responsibility as individuals is much better as well. And they're good players. They're not always the best combination for each other, because Lindelof and Maguire both lack pace, so they can't really cover each other. And Wan-Bissaka doesn't give you much going forward, which is difficult if you don't have a right winger. But it is looking much better than it has. And as I said, like last season, they didn't concede many goals in the run-in, but that didn't really look that much about good defending and that much about organisation and responsibility. It just, sometimes it goes like that. This time, it looks much more like what defending is meant to look like.
About 20 minutes in, there was a good snapshot of events at the other end of the pitch where Luke Shaw made a brilliant run forward, gets to the end line and cuts the ball back, and Rashford and Greenwood aren't even in the shot. They're miles back. And it was a good snapshot, I think, of where United are at from an attacking point of view, and the injuries notwithstanding, which is a further headache. It's been an issue for them, obviously. Where are the goals going to come from now over the next number of weeks?
So the thing I most enjoyed about the goal was that I think there were 6 people in the box and 1 player just outside. And that's going to make a lot of difference. Now, before the game, Ole said that we can't sit back and soak up the pressure. We know we're better when we go forward. And he says that kind of thing a lot, and you don't always see it on the pitch. So I don't know if it's because the players don't have the confidence to do it, aren't doing it, or he's giving them instructions that are stopping that from quite happening in the way that he would like. But I think the problem is that when Cavani doesn't play, they don't have a player who makes the centre forwards runs. Even Mason Greenwood, who's going to grow into a really high-level centre forward, he doesn't get a lot of tap-ins at the front post, and that is where you get the majority of your goals, at the front post. Fergie always used to say that. He's looking to peel off for the cutback so that he can smash one in or place one in from kind of like 10 to 15 yards. So they do need... I mean, I know they've done a lot of work with Anthony Martial on making those kind of runs, and Marcus Rashford needs to make them from the other side as well. And I think we're going to see more of those now that he doesn't have to spend as much time on the touchline, because he's getting a lot more help from Luke Shaw, and Pogba's coming back. So that area of the pitch is going to be spoken for. So I hope we're going to see more of that, more of the wide players coming in, because United score a lot of really good goals, and they don't score enough crap goals. And that's been the case for quite a long time. Like, if you look at Marcus Rashford scored like 15, 16 goals this season, can't remember what it is. He hasn't scored very many crap ones, and those goals are there. And you're right in what you say, that where are the goals going to come from? They haven't exactly struggled for goals, but they're not as replete with them as they should be with their forward lines. And I think one of the things that will make a difference is getting the right player on the right-hand side. which we've seen too much of Rashford playing there, of Daniel James playing there. And I know Daniel James does a good job for the team when he plays there because he's really good. He enables the press. But whether it's Greenwood or Ahmad or someone new, I think next season, if they can get someone to play that position, you'll also see them find it easier to score because at the moment, the teams know that most of the action is going to come down the left. So if they focus their defence on that side, then United are going to struggle to get something from the other side. So it's about finding the right player or picking the right player to play on that right. But as I said at the beginning, it's also about getting more players to attack the box. And I was heartened by what I saw when they scored that first goal last night, because when you have 6 men in the box, that enables you to win the ball back, even in the box, like Fred did. And it means that you're very hard to mark. And when the ball's bobbling about, it's much more likely to fall to a player on the United's team.
So Manchester United now, Daniel, probably favourites to win the Europa League. They've got Leicester City this weekend in the FA Cup. And Solskjaer said this week that winning trophies can sometimes be an ego thing. Would it be more than that to win either of those trophies this season?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think he's also said things that appear contradictory, that it's important to win a trophy. And when he was in the team that won the League Cup in 2006, that squad, it made a big difference in convincing them they could go on and win the league next season when they hadn't won it for a couple of years. And he does know that. I think what he's saying is that if you lose a cup game against another good team, it doesn't mean that you're not developing. It doesn't mean you're not progressing. It doesn't mean you're not a good team. And I think that is fair. But winning big games is important for the development of a team. And I'm sure this team, having gone to San Siro needing to win and won, I'm absolutely certain that will help. That'll give them a boost to their confidence. And so with winning either or both of the cups. I mean, when you say that the team's favourite for a cup, it doesn't mean that much. You can easily see United losing to Arsenal or losing to Roma. They find it difficult to play against Arsenal, actually. And I'd say of all the teams, they're the team against whom they find it hardest to play because they press from the front and sit deep. And those are two things that this particular team find it quite hard to cope with. I mean, they're a better team than Arsenal. I mean, they're a much better team than Arsenal. You just need to look at the league table. But Arsenal's top level is an all right level. And if United don't produce anything close to their top level and those teams play, they could easily lose that tie. They could easily lose a final to that team. They could easily lose to Roma too. And it depends what United you get because they are still capable of playing badly. I felt like against Milan, watching the first leg, it reminded me a bit of when United played Porto in 2009, where they came to Old Trafford and they played really well and they still didn't win. And I was quite confident about United last night because it felt like Milan had played pretty much as well as they could play at Old Trafford, and they still needed a last-minute injury time goal from a set piece and a goalkeeping mistake to not win. And that's sort of the standard of the teams, I think, that are left, that even if they play really well, United could still be good enough to beat them, but they might not be. And as for the cup is really important, I think, because City could still win everything. And it's United's duty to defend the treble that they won in 1999 and to stop that from happening. But the teams that are left in the cup, United could lose to any of those pretty much. So the ability to go on and win something would represent a step forward because they keep losing semi-finals. Another way of looking at it is to say that they've reached the quarterfinals of every cup competition they've been in since Solskjaer became manager, which is quite a good record. But it also means that you're then going to play some big games and you're then going to lose them. Whereas if you're losing earlier, no one would really be saying all that much. So they do need to start winning some big games. I mean, they have won some big games, but they could do with winning one of these two competitions, ideally the FA Cup, but they've got to play Leicester, who have found some form, and Leicester are a good team. And that should be a really good game. Looking forward to that one. But if United play badly, then they'll lose.
Yeah. Just one last thing, Daniel, on probably the bigger story last night is the meltdown of Tottenham Hotspur in Croatia. How do you see these next few months going for Jose Mourinho and Tottenham Hotspur?
It's hard to know because it looked like they were starting to get good again over the last few weeks. They're starting to win some games. He decided to pick Gareth Bale, and amazingly, it turned out that Gareth Bale was good at football, which was a massive turn up for the books. And they looked like a team who'd be hard to defend against. And he was starting to play the kind of team that the difficult to play against, because they weren't sitting back so much anymore. They had Harry Kane, Son, and Gareth Bale. That's 3 players that can really hurt you, and then Ndombele too. But their defending is not good, and you start to wonder, because Mourinho ought to be able to organise a defence, and perhaps this defence is just not good enough, and he just needs to go and buy 3 defenders. But then he bought Matt Doherty, and he's done nothing. And the centre-backs are starting to cost him. I mean, last night was one of those performances you sometimes see from a team where it sort of looks like everyone's tossed it off. And that is a bad sign. And it could easily be dressed up as Mourinho chucking his players under the bus in the way that people like to say he always does. But though they didn't look like a particularly well-organised team, what are you going to do? Like, the players have gone out there, and the players have gone out there 2-0 up from the first leg against Dinamo Zagreb, and they've managed to get themselves beaten 3-0. And what are you meant to say? I don't see why you should let the players get away with that. I don't know what political capital he's got in the dressing room. So maybe the players have had enough of him, and that was a "we've had enough of you" kind of performance. Or maybe the players will look at themselves and say, you know what, he was right and Hugo Lloris was right, and we are a bunch of morons, and that was completely unacceptable. Or maybe it'll be a bit of both. I don't know. But watching the performance, I didn't see the interviews afterwards and think Mourinho is out of order here. He might also be responsible, and maybe he wants to take some responsibility himself, but you can't toss the 2-goal lead and expect your boss to say, well done, that was all on me. And people always say that Alex Ferguson never chucked his players under the bus. It's absolute nonsense. And literally, just before I came on air, I was doing some On This Days. I do On This Day United for my podcast, United Rewind, every day. And on this day in 1995, United lost 2-0 at Anfield. But Peter Schmeichel had maybe the best game that I ever saw him have. It could have been 8-0 if it wasn't for him. And Fergie's interview afterwards, he said, we're absolutely dreadful today. And he didn't say I was dreadful. He blamed the players, because ultimately the players are out there. The players haven't put it in. The players haven't turned up. And it's okay to do that. But if you don't have the political capital to do that, then it might not work. And Fergie obviously had that. We don't know that about Mourinho, but I guess we're going to find out, because they've got some big games coming up.
Yeah, I think that sums it up nicely, the political capital aspect of it. Daniel, thanks a million as always.
No, have a good day, everyone. See you again.